Today, the Sham Inquiry. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to the latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. And today I'm joined again by Robbie Barwick from the CC. Hello, Robbie.
Hello, Martin. How are you?
Good to see you, and I see casual Tuesdays in order. No problem at all.
Thank you. A bit of oversight on my part. We'll try to lift the standard of the discussion.
Yeah, well, that's right. Now, we want to talk about the Senate inquiry into structural separation of banking because it's going round in a ever-decreasing circle by the looks to me.
Yep. Dr. Peter Branson of Bank Reform Now took exception to another inquiry, parallel Senate inquiry into access for justice to bank victims, and he complained about the inquiry runaround, right? And that's all that's happening, and this is another example of it. But I want to deal with it carefully because I think it's a mistake for people to take these instances as evidence that their cynicism is well-founded, right? There's a difference between skepticism and cynicism. Cynicism is when you think nothing can change. Right, and that's just not true. It just means we've got to, in this case, we have to expect this, and we did expect this, right? In a sense, I think we've laid a trap that they've walked into because they had no intention of changing anything really fundamentally after the Royal Commission, but they got to walk a fine line and pay lip service to the fact there needs to be changes because there's the public want change, but so how do they do it? And in this case, though, this is fundamental change. Separating them would go a long way towards fixing up the rot in the system that the Royal Commission identified. It's the thing the banks hate the most, and so they've made sure that this inquiry will go nowhere. So they've made a joke of it. So here's what's happened. So the last time I was on, we were talking about, make the submission that if you go to the inquiry website now, the Senate Economics Legislation Committee inquiry website into the Separation of Banks Bill, they have revealed they have over 900 submissions, and that could mean anything. The same committee a year ago that did the APRA Crisis Resolution Powers Bill, they only reported they had over 1,000 submissions. The chairman told Wilson Sy and myself personally that they got 2,000 submissions, right? So they try and downplay them. Anyway, they're reporting in this case they've got over 900 submissions, so thanks to all the DFA viewers who made a submission. And the submissions are closed, and there will now be a report on the 13th of May. Well, that's still the original date that they scheduled for the report. And the problem is we've got an election on. And they will now supposedly produce a report based on these submissions in the middle of an election. And the Secretariat, there's real bureaucrats on that Secretariat, I find this, but there's some people that are really helpful. And as one of them explained to me in detail the other day, what's involved is in preparing a report is the Secretariat has to produce the skeleton or an outline of it. The chair, Jane Hume, she has to give them her input of what she wants it to say. They will then draft the report. The other 5 senators on the committee, 2 of whom are Liberals like her, and that's why they have the majority, they will then look at the report, and if they have any objections, then it can become just a chairman's report, and they're allowed to produce a dissenting report to that, right? Well, that sounds like an okay process, except that's all going to happen in the middle of an election campaign by mainstream major party politicians. Right? What a joke. They have made a joke of this committee by they had the option to extend it. Public servants and political advisors were telling me by any normal measure the reporting date would be extended. Right? All you got to do is go on a hiatus for the length of the election, have a couple of months afterwards to go through a proper reporting phase. Right? They have refused to do that so that they can just go through the motions and brush this under the carpet.
And I guess there are 3 points that's worth highlighting. Firstly, Hume, of course, is a banker by background, so she's clearly in the no problem, everything's fine camp. Secondly, I know that whilst there were nearly 1,000 submissions, they've only posted a small number so far on the Senate website. I'm not sure whether they're going to post more. They said they were selecting those that were being posted. DFA's submission was there, and I think CSE's was there as well. And then the third thing is, it's essentially now moving towards effectively just producing a report that says, nothing to see here, move on, right? Yep. Now, what we want to make sure is that people understand what is actually going on with this process, and the fact that the serious issues that were raised in the submissions and the serious issues that were raised in the Royal Commission risk, again, being just swept under the carpet, and that's not really acceptable.
It's not acceptable. So in terms of the number of submissions that they've posted, the committee made a decision. That's the elected senators on the committee made a decision. I was informed by the Secretariat that only 30 would be posted. So they've already compromised on that to, I think it's 53 have been posted now. That said, we know that there's of those, the balance of the 900, if that's all it is, I suspect there's a lot more. There's some really significant submissions that they have refused to post as of now, right? Maybe they'll get their act together today, but that hasn't changed in the last 24 hours, including submissions from overseas, right? People in the United States and the United Kingdom, real experts, have made submissions to this inquiry. And of course, if you're Jane Hume, the banker, and who is, in our view, hopelessly conflicted, but get this, Martin, as you know, we in the CEC tell everyone, get involved, go talk to politicians, and people reported back to me who had gone to Jane Hume's office here in Melbourne and spoken to her staffers, that when they raised with them that Jane Hume was a banker, the staffers denied it. No, she wasn't a banker. She just worked for superannuation or something. No, and they didn't even haven't even read her own parliamentary biography. But not only is she a NAB, Rothschild Australia and Deutsche Bank banker, and someone said to me the other day, Deutsche Bank seems to run this government, because Josh Frydenberg's Deutsche Bank, there's a bunch of others. Not only is she have that pedigree as a banker, you can see her role in this Senate, because the minute she was elected, she was only elected in 2016, the election was July, Parliament sat for the first time in September, she's immediately made chairman of this committee, because this is the committee that oversees legislation that affects the banks, right? And this is how the system works. The major parties put their key head kickers into Senate positions, right, that can make sure that they deliver on the agenda of the party, which in this case is the protection of the banks. And Jane Hume does that role incredibly well for them, right? But of course, I think this is overstretched now, right? Because what happened is that it's almost like they've ignored what's happened in the last 18 months. They may have got away with this 18 months ago, where they can just go through the motions and ignore fundamental issues to do with the banks. But the Royal Commission has happened in the meantime. And even though it was rigged, right, and the outcome was pathetic, what happened in the middle of that, the actual hearings, changed the public's perception of the banks and the regulators and the government that protected them. And they think after that Royal Commission, they can just go through the motions, right, and get away with it. Well, the bottom line is they can't get away with it, right? But they will if no one does anything. We have to make sure we make that stick. I'm convinced with these, especially the major parties, they've mastered the art of deflecting, the public's anger, right? To make sure they get away with doing as little as possible with any actual real change. And what they do is they demoralise people and they wear them down and people give up. Well, that's what we have to make sure doesn't happen. Let us wear them down, right? That's going to be key. They, as we put in a press release the other day, I mean, there are times when, it's justified to get outraged, right? And people should be outraged at this, but it's what you do with outrage. And the outrage, relates to as Stephen Long reported on ABC on the 4th of March, he described the lockup, right, when the Royal Commission final report was released. And he has this vivid description of Anna Bligh, the head of the Banking Association, right, and how she was hunched over the desk, furiously scanning the final report. And then after about half an hour, he said she leaned back, relaxed. She scans the room, looks around. He says that the tension visibly slipped away from her shoulders, and she knew it was a good outcome for the banks. And we know from, well, at least Michael Pascoe reported it in the New Daily, that the leak that happened at 11 o'clock that day, that related to why Anna Bligh was relieved, was everyone was obsessed with one thing: will they be broken up or not? This is the number one fear of the banks: will they be broken up or not? And the fact they weren't, massive relief. So that's how they were treated by the Royal Commission, right? Well, Pauline Hanson went into Parliament a week later and introduced this bill, which will break them up. And it'll break them up for very good reasons. And I really urge people, read your submission, Martin North's submission, DFA's submission, explanation of derivatives and all these issues that are fundamental and why this separation is necessary. So we know it's absolutely necessary. Read John Dalson's submission, right, etc., the former ANZ banker. Read Wilson Tsai's very lengthy submission on how fake the regulation in Australia is. Read these submissions. It's all explained in there why it's necessary. But that would produce fundamental reform. That would go a long way to producing the change the public wants. That would go a long way towards giving our economy a functional banking system again that actually, one, serves people instead of exploits them, because there would be no conflict of interest. There'd be nothing in it for the banks to exploit them anymore. Provides more credit for the real economy rather than speculation like in the property bubble. This is what Glass-Steagall would achieve, right? So that small business can get a better deal from the banks. And those are the things, and their investments in small business, credit to small business can help the economy work much better, right? That's the engine for employment, etc. Everyone knows that. Well, it would force the banks to do those things again. And that's what they were, at a minimum, this committee should have taken this very seriously, had a proper inquiry, been as transparent as possible, and held hearings. And instead, they've done everything in their power to make sure that they don't have to do that, right? But it's up to us to make sure they don't get away with it. And this is key. So we have an idea, Martin, of what people can do, because I think we've learned a lot over the last few. I mean, the CEC's been sort of at this for a while, but especially over the last few years, issues have been coming to a head, and in our view, there's never been a better time to intersect and push elected officials in the right direction, right? We're not in a period of politics as usual anymore. In fact, I don't know what politics as usual is anymore. We've had 6 governments in 10 years or something, right? Before that, we had 6 governments in 40 years, right? There's a lot of turmoil, a lot of political turmoil out there. There's a record minor party vote in Australia, and the major parties are freaked out about that. So we have an election on, lots of candidates. This is one of those times when it would be really good for DFA viewers, people who support this policy, go and confront all the candidates, right? The sitting candidate, the challenging candidates, and not just definitely the 2 major ones, but also the minor ones. Confront them all. So that if they get confronted by multiple people on these kind of subjects, right, where you're raising with them something that's not about immediate self-interest, though obviously there is self-interest because it benefits it all, but if you're raising something about, you're going to them and say, look, this is for the good of the country, complain to them about the Royal Commission being rigged, complain to them about the Sham Inquiry, right, that it's not tolerable, explain to them the importance of separating the banks, right, demand to know what they're going to do about it. If they start getting multiple people come and confront them on this kind of issue, it will have a huge impression on each candidate. So whoever wins the election, right, you'll have a whole bunch of new candidates, new parliamentarians in there when Parliament resumes again. This will be ringing in their ears, and that'll lay the basis for what happens after that, right, so that we make sure that they don't get away with rigging this inquiry like they have.
Yep, and of course it's the difference between winning a battle and winning the war, isn't it, essentially?
That's right.
Because we always knew that this was going to be a long, slow, difficult process to be able to actually turn the ship towards where it needs to be turned for all the reasons that we've explained previously in terms of benefit to Australia and Australians, and reduce the risk of bail-in, a whole bunch of other things, separate issues to do with derivatives and all those things. So this is continuing the pressure, continuing the process. So essentially, don't give up. Use this as an opportunity to essentially table this issue. Every time you meet a candidate, ask them about what's going on with regard to banking separation, deposit bail-in, all those sorts of things, the bad behaviour of the banks. So essentially, everybody knows that this is not going to get swept away.
And if you're and for those who are really fired up, call Jane Hume's office and demand she recuse herself. Right? This, we can't tolerate these kind of rigged games anymore. And Labor wouldn't be that much better when they're in government. They'll play the same kind of tricks, right? But it's intolerable. They kind of have this. I call it a power sharing agreement. They'll scream at each other, but then when push comes to shove, they have this kind of consensus on what's acceptable, and they have an instinctive aversion to anything, to the barbarians at the gate. That's what we are, right? The people who want to come in and bring in real change, and they would like us to turn tail and go home. Don't, right? Give them hell on this, and things like her, having a banker rigger commission like this. And remember, the other guys are bankers, as half of them are bankers on this committee, right? This is intolerable. Why should they get to just so blatantly rig the system for their old associates, right? They shouldn't get away with it. So yeah, that's the key that I wanted to get across today. Let's just, look on the bright side. They're fighting on our territory, right? We're forcing them to have these inquiries, etc. That was not a small deal; it was a very big deal, right? But don't convince yourself, that your cynicism is well founded. This is all predictable. It's always going to happen. No. See it as a battle within a war, as you said, and keep fighting. And in this case, understand we have an election on. The secret people need to know about elections and candidates. They want to hear from you at the moment. When they get elected, they might treat you a bit differently, but right now they want to hear from you. They want you to come and talk to them, right? So make sure you do. And I challenge anyone to find a politician that's prepared to defend any kind of candidate that's prepared to defend the banks at the moment, right? So if they're not prepared to defend them, this is a key test. This inquiry. What are you going to do about it? That's what you need to confront them with.
Yeah, Robbie, great. Thanks for that. Well, we'll put a link through to the release that you made and also to the Senate site so people can actually look at the submissions that were made. And I've already had a few people say to me that that's what precisely they're going to do. So effectively, this is not over yet. Good. We'll continue the dialogue, continue the push.
By the way, the US Congress just introduced the Glass-Steagall bill there to break up their banks, right? It's just, this is and they're up against the same vested interests over there, but in a sense, think of what we're doing as coordinated. So, yep. And read those. I really urge people, read the submissions like yours. It's really educational. It'll give them a lot of ammunition when they have these discussions.
Great, Robert. Well, thanks for your time today, and we'll keep tic-tacking on this. It's certainly not over till it's over.
That's right. Thanks, Martin.
See you later. Thanks.